Loree, thanks for visiting with me today. Loree is actually my sister-in-law. Is that what they call you when you are so my husband's sister? Is that technically a
I
sister-in-law?
think it's right, but I always get this messed up. So we'll just go with it.
Okay, great. And I would just love for you to just introduce yourself, take a few moments, just tell us a little bit about who you are and who you help and what you do.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Lindsay, for this opportunity to speak with you and whoever in the future gets to watch this. So as Lindsay mentioned, my name is Loree Phillip, and I was a former Boeing corporate leader. And I decided, I guess it was around the beginning of the pandemic, that maybe being in corporate for 16 plus years wasn't going to be my thing forever. And although it was good and the salary was good and everything was just okay, it wasn't great. And there was something that really tugged at me as to, do you really want to be doing this for another 15, 20 years? I mean, I was just mid-career at that point. And so I decided over the course of over a year, it took me, because these decisions did not happen overnight, but I decided that I was going to completely change my career. I left Boeing. I started a business, and I focused in on supporting women with career coaching and leadership coaching. And so what I really do is help both people who are in their careers, who are struggling, who want to take that next step, who are kind of questioning, like, do I want to do this? I help them navigate that and figure out what's best for them and help them gain the confidence to make those decisions. And then I also support women who are just looking to become their best selves and grow their leadership skills, grow their confidence, and really accelerate their careers wherever that might be. So those are kind of the two focus areas I'm looking at right now. But there's kind of wide applicability there.
Yeah, that's an amazing history to think that after that long you were like, this isn't where I want my life to be going anymore. So
yeah, people thought I was totally crazy. They're like, are you sure? Like, even it took me a while, and my husband, but like, even he was like, waiting it out to see if it was a fad that was going to go away. And then I spent like a year getting training and coaching. And then I think at some point he realized it wasn't going anywhere. And this is what I was going to do.
This is here to stay. Yeah. I remember early on in when Henry and I were also taking the leap and building our business and things like that, that we'd have some calls and you helped us kind of realign our mindset and help give us some direction in such a way that it was almost like you facilitated us figuring it out, if that makes sense, which I think is very helpful.
Yeah. And I think that's where people get caught up, is we spend most of our lives doing things that other people tell us are the right things to do, whether it's first you go to college and then you get this specific job and then you move up the ladder or whatever it is. Everybody has their own thing, but they're used to having other people give us advice. And I think really the difference with a coaching approach or with supporting somebody is to help them understand, like, what is it that they actually want to do and bring that out. Because at the end of the day, that's going to be the most powerful to know what is, the right thing for you, and nobody else can tell you what that is.
Yeah, exactly. I don't know about you, but you have two children. We have one. After we had our son, I was almost just like taken aback by how much my brain wanted to change what I was doing. Kind of like you, it was almost like an alert. Like, is this what I want to be doing for the rest of my life? Because I've been in the, generic physical therapy clinic for years. And I just thought I wanted to do that forever. But it slowly started to be like, wow, I may want to reprioritize my life. I may want to spend more time with my family, help raise my son a little bit more. So there were a lot of like mental shifts and I guess changes that I felt like I really wanted. And which is why we did what we did and, started our company so that we could hopefully leverage our time better and spend more time with our family. Which is why I wanted to speak with you because you were so good at kind of helping us through that phase. And there are probably other women who are in the same boat, whether it's, pregnancy, postpartum, or even just a life change, maybe graduated college in their career and they're like, whoa, I can't even take care of myself right now. How do I juggle this?
Yeah, I'm so glad you brought that up, Lindsay. And just one thing I wanted to point out in what you said is that it was kind of after you had Leo that these things started to come up. And I think where we sometimes forget is that there's like, it's okay to have like a stage and a time for everything. And like, there's a time where you're single and you have more flexibility and you can travel or you can spend more time in your work that you love. And it's also okay to change your priorities when your life changes. And I feel like sometimes we just feel like, oh, I made this choice and I have to keep it forever, where it's not true. Like, it's okay to change your mind and we're not stuck forever doing something if we decide that it's not right for us anymore. And it doesn't mean you didn't love it then. And it doesn't mean that it's not right for somebody else, but it's about deciding for yourself, like what's best for me right now, given my current, where I am in my life.
Yeah, it made me think about our, fellow women and moms that choose to stay home with their kids. And they're like, this is the phase of life that I am choosing for our family right now. But then again, it doesn't have to be forever. It could be 2 years, 5 years, 6 months, like just to feel like they could have that freedom still, even though they do want to be like a caretaker and want to spend more time with their child, or the reverse, somebody who's career driven, who really wants to pursue their career and advance in their career, even though they have a changing family life. And then kind of incorporating all of these into the pelvic health realm, because that is where I sit on a daily basis, trying to think of how to help women in their overall health, of course, and then their pelvic health. So often I find so many people are having issues with stress, and that is like showcased in their body. And a lot of times, unfortunately, it comes with pelvic health kind of pain and dysfunction and things like that. So we talk a lot about like how to manage our routines and things like that. When with working with women that you've worked with, how do you kind of start the conversation of I don't know, like navigating that realm?
Yeah, I think sometimes we forget how everything affects everything else. So if you have a stressful job, that's going to impact your home life. If you have a stressful home life, that's going to impact your job. We don't necessarily, and maybe we shouldn't do a good job, like compartmentalizing it all, where it's like, okay, at work, everything's great. At home, everything, like it affects. We can't just split ourselves into pieces. And so what I've noticed, especially with the physical health, is that when clients that I talk to, if they are not listening to themselves, if they're in a very stressful environment and they're not doing anything to change it, the first thing that would come up is the stress. Prolonged stress over time will affect your health. And at some point, your body will just reject it. Like, if you're not going to slow down, I will slow down for you with whatever way that might manifest itself. And there's a lot of ways, right? So if you don't stop it in time, your body will typically and make that choice for you. And it's not necessarily the most pretty thing. And it's not something we want to deal with. And the timing's never great and all the things. But really, it's you telling you that there's something wrong and that you need to listen to yourself. So a lot of the coaching I do has a lot to do with having my clients really start to listen to themselves, trust themselves, hear themselves, so that we can get past this before it becomes a physical issue, before the stress like completely explodes, and then there's something else on top of it that has to be dealt with.
Well, what in the people that you've seen, how does that kind of manifest physically? Like, what are some of the telltale signs that you start to see things start to change, or you want to prevent the spiral downward?
Yeah. So I had this conversation when I was doing my podcast with a variety of specialists in various areas. And one of the first things that you'll start to see is this feeling of overwhelm. So first it's like thinking of stress, and then it hits your feelings like, I'm overwhelmed, there's too much going on, I can't handle it all, I don't have enough time. Like it starts to really, and then it impacts your sleep, it impacts your, obviously, the mood, it impacts your wanting to like get up in the morning and do what you need to do. And so there could be procrastination. There could be a lot of things that it affects before it gets physical. And then the physical is very personal. I've talked to people who ended up getting various forms of cancer. I've talked to people that have had, various like huge health scares that had, stress related type of health scares that led them to be out for months, out of work and do that kind of thing. So it really depends. I think that one you can't predict, like, where is it going to come out in the body? But you can get ahead of it by starting to notice the stress level, the not sleeping, the overwhelm, these are other signs that you can see to start to get ahead of the game and start to think, okay, I need to really pay attention to this. And I think the one thing I want to point out is when we start to see things that aren't going great, whether it's like, okay, I'm stressed, a lot of our instinct is to kind of beat ourselves up about it. Like, I should be able to handle all of this. I should be able to go to work and be perfect like mom or, wife or just person and handle it. Like, what am I doing wrong that I can't? And that just adds fuel to the fire. That is not supportive. And so we try to avoid that. Like, okay, it is what it is. Let's not add to it by beating ourselves up. Let's figure out how we can get out of it together and move forward.
That's easier said than done.
It is. I always get this. It's a vicious circle. Like, don't beat yourself up for beating yourself up.
For beating yourself up.
Yeah.
Oh, I did it again.
Why am I doing that? Yeah.
Oh man. Yeah. Is there, I don't know, whenever that happens to me, sometimes I find ways to like try to interrupt the thought process. Like, if I start to go down that road, I might have like my go-to like hype song where I need to like change my mindset almost to interrupt it. Are there strategies that you found that can help with that kind of interrupt your mindset so it doesn't go down the wrong way?
Yeah, and it's interesting because the word mindset is pretty broad. And so we could talk about it a lot of ways, but honestly, like your thinking and your thoughts and everything are habits. So
Mhm.
one of the ways is just awareness that just because you're thinking something, one, it doesn't mean it's true. Two, it doesn't mean that it's a habit. So it doesn't mean you can't change it or let it go or put something in that's more supportive than what you've historically used as thoughts, recurring thoughts in your mind. And the pattern interrupt is important. And I know you were talking about like a hype song or other things that you can do to shift, like maybe get yourself out of I don't know what the right word is, a funk, a spiral, that kind of
Yeah.
thing.
Mhm.
And all of those things are great tools to know, okay, if I'm feeling this way, this is kind of what works for me to get
Mhm.
ourselves out of it. But one of the things that I think we are not quite understanding of is sometimes, or actually most of the times, like if you're really down and you're like over here and it is almost impossible to turn around and be like, yay, everything's great, blah, blah, blah. And so
Right.
what we need to do is start to shift ourselves a little bit in the other direction. So it's not
Mhm.
so extreme of like, okay, everything's crappy right now, and I'm supposed to believe that everything's great. And we're smart. We're not going to believe it. And we're just going to go back to what we were doing, right? So what we need to do is sort of like start to see the silver linings, start to see little things. There are some good techniques around getting physical out of your mind into your heart. Start to feel and touch things with your hands and your
Mhm.
feet and look around and notice where you are and what's actually happening versus what's going on in your head, which is not actually happening in real life, like in reality, in that moment. And so these are various things that people can consider when they get caught up in those spirals, is to start to slowly shift. And obviously, if you have something that works every time, all the power to you to
Yeah.
be able to kind of hype yourself up. But it doesn't always work. So we try to then also build habits that become your new state of like being, like, this is how I think now. And what's great is when you start to focus yourself that way, and this isn't in the moment, like, I think where it's hard and people get caught up is that when we're down, as I mentioned before, you can't go this way. So we don't want to practice all of these things when you're down. What you want to do is find moments when you're actually feeling good to start to then, during those moments, practice thinking those either positive thinking or, setting your goals or whatever it is that you want to do. There's a time and place to do it where it's more effective than other times.
Yeah, that definitely makes a lot of sense because one, there are not, like you said, there aren't just a one size fits all routine that works for everybody all the time, right? Some people really respond to music. Some people really resonate, like you said, to movement, to kind of connecting to their bodies a little bit more. And then everyone's different. And I found that too in my practice when I'm working with clients who have, let's say, for example, sexual trauma, and they're dealing with like
Mhm.
painful, like their pelvic pain, pain with intercourse, a lot of that sort of thing. They are hopefully working with, a mental health care provider, but we often walk through just either they distract themselves in a positive way during some of like their therapy, um, physical therapy. um, they can also change their mindset on how they perceive it, and sometimes people have to change their mindset to be more like clinical, like this is homework, this is collecting data instead of like, well, now I've got to do all this pelvic stretches and dilators, and it gets overwhelming and kind of scary, right? So yeah, there's a lot of these strategies that we can even do in office to help facilitate them grounding themselves a little bit better and perceiving it different than how they've perceived it in the past, or how, certain situations and trauma have formed how their body responds and how their brain responds. I don't know, that was a lot, but
no, I totally understand what you're talking about. In the perception part and the definitions are really important. The way that we define something is just the way we perceive it, the way we experience it. So if we're just like, let's just take work, for example. And if our definition of work is, work sucks, my boss is terrible, I barely make enough money. Like, we have these definitions we put on what work means to us. When you hear the word work, when you go to work, you're going to perceive it that way. You're like, oh, you're going to find more reinforcing reasons that you're right, that it sucks, that my boss is terrible, that, all these things will happen. And you're like, I was right. Work,
Yep.
So we have the power to change our definitions and say, actually, I choose to go to work because the paycheck I get makes such a big difference for my family. And it puts a roof over my head. And like, there are ways you can spin it without being ridiculous.
Right.
And it works for a person, and it can make a big difference in how you feel going forward. Whatever it is you're doing, whether it's physical therapy, it's work, just play around with, like, do I want to change the way I look at this? And I've talked to some of my clients about this, because at the end of the day, we want to feel better. And so even if it feels like it's gimmicky or it's a trick, if it helps you feel better, I believe it's worth it. And the bonus will be that it actually becomes better. And so why not? Like, why automatically feel crappy about it when you can, decide for yourself that you want to change the way you look at something?
Yeah, that's a great mindset to have. We've actually started saying in front of our son, instead of being like, oh, I have to go to work now, we've started saying, like, mommy needs to go help people feel better. Or, oh, I met this really nice lady who needs mommy's help. And so then he starts asking about people, like, did you make them feel better? And I'm like,
cute.
I did. And then, that kind of mindset is really helpful, I think, to kind of mirror for him too, that work isn't a bad word. And I don't want to, like, punish him with work either, like, as a consequence, I'm going to try really hard not to be like, oh, you did something bad, now go work. But as like a positive, like, outlet and how we sustain ourselves and that sort of thing. So I really like how you change that mindset there. So as far as, like, taking some of these things, I know we've talked a little bit about changing the mindset, putting in some, like, habits. Like, it's not something that's just going to go immediately 180 on you, but just putting small habits into place that over time will build up to be like a healthy mindset. But are there any, I guess, takeaways that somebody listening could be like, wow, I am a new mom and I'm about to go back to back to work after my maternity leave. I'm overwhelmed. This is my first kid. I have no idea what I'm doing just raising a kid, let alone, like, pursuing my career. Like, how would you kind of begin that transition? What would, I guess, something you could say to them?
Yeah. I would say first to take a few breaths, to pause, that it's going to be okay. And it all comes back to self-care and self-love. And I say that because this hypothetical person you just described was talking about all the things that they have to go do to care for another person, to go to work. They have all of these roles and responsibilities that are kind of put on them. And I didn't hear anything in there about taking care of themselves, getting enough rest, enjoying life, going out with friends. Like over time, we build up all of these identities for other people, and we sometimes forget ourselves in the process. And it goes back to finding some time for you, even if it starts out to be 10 minutes of doing something you love, or thinking about something you love, or taking a walk, or just having some quiet time without the kid, running up and needing you, because it is absolutely true that you can be your better self with your kid at work, for your husband, for your friends, for your mom, when you're fill your cup first. As much of a cliche as that might be for some people, it is so true. You will be better for everybody else if you take care of yourself first. So that is my initial advice, is to take some time, and then you can build it from there. It's like you get 10 minutes today and you fill up your cup a little bit, and the next day, and it builds just like sleep builds. You start to build that habit, and maybe you schedule it in, so it's just part of your routine. And then you get more ideas, and you get more ideas, and then before you know it, you're like, rocking it.
Yeah. Like, I've built a great routine, and I love that you recognize that I reverted back to the place that I was in as a postpartum mom, having to go back to work and having to do all these things, and I wasn't even myself. And that's why I think I had to talk to my boss, and I was like, I can't handle this. I need to go back to like 30 hours a week. And then eventually it led me to quitting, because I wasn't taking care of myself. So that's something that I've experienced firsthand. But yeah, definitely holding yourself accountable to yourself to take care of certain things that you need. And you can ask for help too. Like, I've worked with women who say that they get their time to go to the gym, and that's literally all the time that they have in the whole day to themselves, just that time in the gym. And I'm like, can we not carve away 5 minutes to do a few of your home exercises before bed? Or maybe you ask your husband or your spouse to take your child in the other room for 15 minutes so you can kind of meditate after a long day of taking care of the child, or, the life or the career, things like that. And then, you can complement that and offer that for your partner as well. But they don't know that you need the help if you don't ask. And so many times these women aren't asking for the help that they need. They just step up and fill every minute of their day.
Yeah, it's a lot of things. It is a lot of things for sure. Asking is part of it. Part of it is realizing that you're worth it. like that you should be able to have 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, and that you value yourself enough to ask for help. There's also something in there for some people that feel like they have to do it all themselves. That's a personality trait that comes back and like, I should be able to do it all and balance, juggle all the balls in the air, not let anything drop, and make it happen. And so for those people, it's getting past that they actually need to, and that their loved ones would actually love to support them if they ask and if they let them,
Let
right?
them. Yeah.
If you let them. I mean, it's like, okay, well, if your husband decides that he wants to wash the dishes, but you're like, no, you never do it right, I'll do it. Because I know I've been there.
Right, which probably happens more times than not for a lot of very type, A
Yeah.
go-getters. Like I've been in a rhythm and I'm just getting everything done the way that I know it needs to be done. And I've felt that before too, where I just kind of had to say, you know what, the house is not going to be as clean as I want it to be. And I just released myself of that like burden of always trying to frantically pick up after all of us, because it's not just Leo and it's not just my husband, it's me too. But sometimes you just have to just let it go. So I love that.
Yeah. And I think the other piece is that sometimes we're thinking, we built up this story in our mind and it's almost like all or nothing. Like if I ask for help, I'm going to need, to ask for an hour or 2 hours or like a spa day or anything. When in reality is, I bet most people would feel so much better just starting with like 15 minutes or 10 minutes. And it's not this huge thing that we make it out to be. And the requests can actually be quite small. And that's a great place to start. And then the one more thing, I was like, this has brought up a whole can of worms. But I have this mantra, like, let it be easy. Let it be easy. So when we're building habits, one of the easiest things you can do is attach it to an existing habit. Like, so you don't have to remember it. It doesn't have to be new. Like if you get up and you take a shower and you brush your teeth, that's something you do every day. You can add like 5 minutes onto the end of that and do an exercise routine or a stretch or whatever. It's like, or maybe your bedtime routine is a certain thing and it would be great to add a hot bath to it, or it'd be great to add. So I would say let it be easy, but also pick things you enjoy that accomplish the goal. So, if you want to get into shape, doesn't mean you have to spend 3 hours at the gym. If you enjoy hiking, if you enjoy yoga, or if like actually do stuff that's sustainable that you'll keep doing and not just like, the fad workouts or the fad dieting where you're yo-yoing and you're doing it for 2 weeks and I can't do it anymore because it's terrible. Well, that's not going to hold. That's just going to be like self-power, like will determination is going to get you so far until you're like, screw this, I'm not doing it anymore.
Yeah, I've definitely seen that happen a lot. And I love how you mentioned that you pair a habit with something that you just automatically do. So I've done things like you mentioned showering. For some C-section women, they have scar work that they need to do. And I'm like, do you take a shower or a bath? Do you get out of the bath? Do you ever put lotion on? Take 20 extra seconds and rub the incision, do a few of these mobility drills for it. And what you're like down a minute and it's already done, So that's a really good technique that I love that you brought that up. So yeah, everything I didn't want to be like everything in moderation, but that just is a mantra that came to me, but that's not what I wanted. That's not what I wanted to say. I don't know. My brain, it left the thing that I was going to say. I know the mantra that I've been saying to myself lately, because I am my worst critic. So I have like 2 inner voices, and one of them's like all down on myself, like, who do you think you are that you think you can do that? And then I go, watch me. And then it's just like this determination of being like, I'm going to prove myself wrong. And then I do. And then I build confidence in myself every time I do that. Like, I don't need to trust her, that little negative voice in my head. Like, she's always wrong.
Yeah. And this goes back to what I was saying. Just because it pops in your head doesn't mean it's true.
Yep.
And you are always bigger than the thoughts that pop in your head like that. Like it's a part of you, and she can be loud, and she can control your emotions sometimes and get you into a state. But at the end of the day, it's just one tiny part of you out of all the parts of you. And so that's why you can be like, watch me, and put that, you know what I mean? But she's still part of you and just wants some love, you know? So having fun with her, like saying that is kind of a cool way to do that, without being like, stop it, you know, or pushing against, because that kind of thinking will push back so hard. It's just like anything else. It's like when you push against something, it pushes it back. And so we can be fun with it, and that's a great strategy. We can be gentle with it, but we don't want to push it away, stuff it down, ignore it, that kind of thing.
Yeah, that's the most common, is to just box it up and let it just fester. And like you said, it just will push back, and it will find its way back out. You know, if I just convince myself that that part of me doesn't exist, I'm not going to convince myself she doesn't exist. So, but anyway, so I feel like we've had kind of an interesting conversation. It might not have been what we had originally planned, but I feel like we've got a lot of takeaways from it, from building habits to kind of some mindset ways to talk to yourself, find time for yourself. And anything else that we touched on that you could help me kind of summarize?
I think you covered it pretty well. I think the only thing that I want to bring up that we haven't discussed yet is to not discount your own power around deciding. Like some of the biggest shifts we can make for ourselves, where we actually did it, where we actually made the change, where we saw something, like whether it's like we got in shape or we built that habit or we got that, you know, was we once and for all decided that we were going to do it. And once you decide, it's really hard to undecide with that powerful decision. But when we're on the fence, like, yeah, I guess I'll try it, and we're already kind of hedging our bets around, the last time I tried this, it didn't work out, and I tend to sabotage myself, or I start out strong and then I fizzle out, and we're already coming up with excuses. It's a good indication for you to notice that you're split, that there's going to be a part of you that's going to be pushing against the part of you that actually wants to make the change. And so that's where people need to just notice it. Just notice that it's there, and notice that you have the power to be like, you know what, actually, this is what I want, and this is what I'm going to do. And when that part of me comes up, I'm going to see it. I'm going to smile at it. I'm going to prove it wrong. I'm going to say, you know what, we decided we're going this way. You know, it's okay. I understand where you're coming from, but this time it's different. And so these are some of the things that we can start to notice when we're seeing ourselves being a bit wishy-washy about something that we're doing where we're not really all in.
Yeah, that kind of commitment is very important for the rehab realm as well. I've seen it countless times where, you know, individuals are hopeful. They're very hopeful that something's going to help them. But when it comes down to, like you said, that decision of, am I fully committed to this, or am I kind of split, or are there past like experiences or failings that are pulling me back and keeping me from going all in? Is that kind of holding me back? And then they've not progressed. They haven't succeeded the way they want to. And then it almost becomes like, see, I knew it wasn't going to work, but they never really went full in. And I'm just like, just shaking, like, you didn't do it all, like we just barely scratched the surface, but to them it was this big failing that it didn't work. So, but yeah, that commitment's hard to make, especially when you already have a lot of things going on in your brain, which is why coaches exist, therapists exist, like that's why it's so nice that someone else, if you're like, I put it in your hands, like, please guide me. And all I have to do is like check it off and educate myself and empower myself to be a different person slowly with some guidance. That's where I feel like we can come in and kind of help. I don't know. How do you feel about that?
Totally. I mean, we talked about asking for support or asking for help. And it goes back to this fallacy that we can do everything ourselves. And sure, you can, but I guarantee you the experience will be so much better if you allow in support. And you don't have to do it all by yourselves. And you can have people that have gone through it who can give you their, expertise and tips. And this is how it worked for me. And I know where you are. And just even if it's that person that's like, I understand what you're going through, and this time it's going to be different, and to help you rewrite your story. And you know what I mean? Like it doesn't have to be that way. And, if you go look at successful people, whether it's professional athletes, executives, leaders, whatever, politicians, they all have support. They all have support. They don't do anything by themselves. They have support. And we also can have support, and it doesn't have to cost a ton of money. It could be a friend. It could be your husband just doing the dishes in the worst way, but you're okay with it this time. It could be, I remember I would go into the bathroom and close the door and just take a little extra time using the bathroom just to have that peace and quiet when my kids were little. Of course, they would come knocking on the door, and I'm like, go away. But, it's like listening to ourselves, trusting what we hear, and taking some action. And you said moderation earlier, but it is true. We sometimes feel like we have to jump jump across the Grand Canyon to make it. But the reality is we just need to take one step today, one step tomorrow, one step the next day. And over time, we can build something, whether it's our health, our careers, our life. And it doesn't have to be this miraculous overnight shift. And it can be small and gradual. And that's going to be what's sustainable anyway.
Yeah, I agree. Well, Loree, we can kind of finalize everything here, but thank you so much for your time and your conversation. This has been fun. I don't get to see you very often, so it's like a way to force you to talk to me. Just kidding.
Oh, we need to work on that. It's going to be full season soon, and we can start
getting the kids
Leo to Leo over to go swimming, because I know he's a fish.